WRFG, and we heard from the album Time Gone by Mace Hibbard. It's called Hallowed Ground. And that came from where?
The title?
Yeah, in that piece.
The title, honestly, I don't remember at all.
You got too much stuff going on. Yeah.
Well, no, I just, I'm terrible at naming tunes, and so, sometimes I could just be watching TV and I'll see, a TV show, and the title of the TV show will be called Hallowed Ground. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll call it that. Sometimes the tunes have significance. For instance, December 18th, which is the second cut on the record, that's my son's birthday. So some of them have meaning, some of them have absolutely no meaning at all. Sometimes it's just sort of a vibe of the tune, and so I kind of try to come up with a title that goes along with that. The actual tune, I've been listening to a lot of the saxophonist Donnie McCaslin. He had this, a few years ago, he put out this great album called Soar, and there's this one track on it, I don't remember what the name of the track was, but it seemed like it was built around sort of this vamp section, and then the rest of the tune was sort of built around that, and so I was just sort of playing around with that idea to see if I could do that. And so that last bit of the song that you just heard, that came first. I wrote that, and then I wrote the rest of the tune sort of around that. So that's sort of where that tune came from. It's sort of a Coltrane, sort of Elvin Jones-ish feel to it at times.
And you know what? Titles are just a way for us to keep up with.
Right.
Okay, we're going to play this song and that song and that song. But the inspiration is what's important.
Right. And, well, like I said, and sometimes the titles do mean something, and maybe if I were writing lyrics, then the titles would mean a lot more. But, sometimes it's just a joke between me and somebody in the band. That's a lot of it, to be honest.
Okay. So you graduated from University of Texas.
That's right. And then I actually went and got my master's degree after that, and got that in jazz studies. So
this was at the UT?
Yeah.
Okay.
I stayed there. I was waiting for my wife to finish her she was sort of a year behind me each time. So I knew I was going to be sticking around Austin for a while waiting for her. Not waiting for her, that sounds wrong, but you understand what I mean. Mm-hmm. And so I figured, well, since I'm going to be sticking around, they offered me a teaching assistantship in both the classical and jazz departments, so, seemed like a good deal.
Hey.
So I stuck around.
And continued to travel?
Yeah, well, I continued. I had a band there at that time that actually Mark, the bass player on the album, he and I were in a band together in Austin. We went to college together. So I was doing basically the same thing in Austin, writing tunes and trying to perform with my band on somewhat of a smaller scale. Austin is a great music scene, but just from the size of the city, it's inherently smaller than someplace like Atlanta, or obviously New York or Chicago, but it's a great music scene. So I was doing basically the same thing, just sort of on a little bit smaller of a scale.
Yeah. So what prompted you to move from Texas?
Well, kind of what we were just talking about. I wanted to get to a bigger city, and my wife and I are both from Texas. She's from San Antonio, or the San Antonio area, and we were kind of in that we wanted to get out on our own and see what was out there, sort of idea. Because we both love Texas and it's definitely home, but we felt like for our growth we sort of needed to not have family an hour away, that could come in and save the day if something was going on, and so we had a few cities in mind, and I had a friend that taught at a college in Alabama right across from the Georgia border, and he said, well, hey, if you move to Atlanta, you can come over here and teach a couple days a week, and that sounded good.
Yeah.
And my wife got a job here. She had been applying here in a couple other major cities, and she got a job here first. And so we said, well, let's give it a shot. And I knew a couple of musicians here already. I'd met Joe Granston when I'd come to visit, and I knew Justin, who's the drummer on the record. He and I had known each other for a few years before that. We had a mutual friend in common, so I kind of knew some guys.
Yeah. So you moved here, and
Yep.
what did you start doing as soon as you, I mean...
When I first got here, for the first few years, I was working at Jacksonville State in Alabama. So I'd go over there a couple days a week. And then, you know, I was just trying to meet musicians and, you know, trying to be on the scene. And then after a couple of years, I got the job at Georgia State. And so that, you know, opened up a few more doors in terms of both teaching and playing, obviously. And then Mark, the bass player again on the record, is originally from Atlanta. And like I said, he and I went to Texas together. And he moved to Seattle for a little bit. And he didn't like it for a variety of reasons. So he moved back to Atlanta. And once he moved to Atlanta, that was sort of, he's sort of the missing link in a way. Because he knew my writing, and he and I are really, really close friends. And so it just sort of, everything kind of came together at that point. I had met Lewis. Justin and I had been friends for quite a while. And so we just started playing.
Wow. So where did the Derek Trucks band come in? How'd that happen?
I think it was around 2004. So a couple years after I moved to town, you know, it's one of those just crazy things. You know, you get a phone call and you never really know where those things lead. But a trumpet player named Paul Garrett, who I had played some society gigs with in town, we had gotten the call to play with Derek on New Year's at the Variety Playhouse. They decided they wanted a horn section because it was New Year's Eve. They wanted to do something interesting and different. And so he and Paul Garrett and I and a trombonist, Kevin Hyde, went and did that gig. And then we didn't do another gig with him, I don't think, until the next New Year's. And he had moved over to the Fox at that point. And then so for a while, it was we would do New Year's, and there's this big festival in Florida called the Wani Festival, and we'd go down and do that. And as we kind of, you know, it just sort of grew out of that. And I remember they asked us to play Bonnaroo with us, and so we went out to Bonnaroo. And while we were sitting on the bus, getting ready to play, Derek said, "Hey, my new record's supposed to be into Sony in like a week and a half, but I want some horn parts. Can you guys get it done by then?" And I said, "Well, sure." So we went in and laid that down, and then he and his wife, Susan Tedeschi, who's an incredible singer and guitar player.
Yeah.
At that point, they were in the summers. They were putting a band together called Soul Stew Revival, and so we went out on tour with them one summer. And then, you know, it kind of just went from there.
So where did this Grammy thing come in?
Well, the album that, like I said, he asked if we could put horn charts on that record, and so we put some horn parts on the record, and a year later it wins a Grammy. So, you know, I don't claim to have, you know, a huge hand in that, you know, in that winning a Grammy, but just being a part of an organization and a band of that caliber, it's inspiring on so many levels. And personally, Derek and Susan they're just top-notch people and really good friends. And so, you know, and then after that we ended up doing one more album with Derek, the Derek Trucks Band. He had asked the horn section to come up to Chicago for 2 nights, and that was really it. They just wanted us to come up for 2 nights, and then, you know, I got an email from Derek or his manager or somebody that said, "Listen, these nights went so well that we want to put it out as a live CD." And I said, "That works for me."
Cool.
So, and yeah.
Wow.
So that's that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a story, man. You seem to be at the right place at the right time.
Well, you know, a lot of it really is just sort of luck and making sure, hopefully, that when you do get yourself in the right place, that you
perform,
that you do what you're supposed to.